Teacher Talking Sports, what it does, what it do, how we live, and let's continue the series I've been doing where I attempt to name the best player in each NFL franchise's history, their all-time GOAT. I've been doing these in alphabetical order by team name. Today we land on the Minnesota Vikings. Now the Minnesota Vikings inaugural season was 1961. That's the only name they've been known by. So they have played 64 seasons of NFL action. So to pick just one player as the GOAT is difficult. Now, 2 off seasons ago, I did my NFL Mount Rushmore by teams, the 4 best players in each NFL team's franchise history. Last offseason, I did my NFL Mount Rushmores by position, the best 4 players at each position in NFL history. So before I go on and choose my GOAT, I've been looking at my team Mount Rushmores, seeing who I picked, would I change anything in the 2 years that have passed, and before I get into the go to the franchise. So in alphabetical order, I included defensive end Carl Eller, part of the Hall of Fame All 1970s team, a Hall of Fame Class 2004. Randall McDaniel, a 12-time Pro Bowler as a guard, 7-time first team All Pro. Alan Page was named the MVP in 1971 as well as Defensive Player of the Year. And Fran Tarkington, a 9-time Pro Bowler, 1975 MVP quarterback. Now, there were some big names I did not include, and this was one of the harder ones. 2 of the biggest omissions were fairly recent guys. Wide receiver Randy Moss, one of the most electrifying players in NFL history. Of course, not all of his career was with the Vikings, had great seasons with the Patriots as well. And Adrian Peterson, very high on the all-time rushing list. Much of that with the Vikings. I mean, other guys, honorable mentions, Chris Carter, Gary Zimmerman, Chris Dolman, John Randall, Joey Browner, Dalvin Cook, Chuck Foreman, Ron Yary, Steve Jordan, and Jared Allen, to name a few. They have had some truly historic players, so to limit it to 4 was a challenging endeavor, and maybe even more so is limiting it to just one. So, who do I consider to be the GOAT of the Minnesota Vikings? This was hard, but I'm going with defensive tackle Alan Page. Page was the 15th overall pick in the 1967 NFL Draft, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1988. All in all, Page played 12 seasons with the Vikings, spanning from 1967 to 1978. Well, 6 games in 1978 until he joined the Bears, where he played 10 games 1978 in the last 3 seasons, but 160 total games with the Vikings. As I mentioned, was named the 1971 MVP. There's been just 2 defensive players named MVP. Page was the first. Lawrence Taylor became one later. He also had an MVP finish of 3rd and 2 Defensive Player of the Year finishes of 4th. 1971 was actually the first season they handed out Defensive Player of the Year, so he was the first player to ever win it. Let's take a look at his season-by-season numbers via his Pro Football Reference page. So sacks were not an official sack in his career, but Pro Football Reference does list sacks from 1960 on. So altogether, 108.5 sacks in his 12 seasons with the Vikings. Impressive as a defensive tackle. He had a total of 5 seasons in which he reached double-digit sack totals. You see that approximate value. That's a number given by Pro Football Reference. Basically show how impactful the guy was for the season. Basically anything above the 10 is great. You see he had 9 straight seasons over 10 and 3 straight from 1969 to 1971 where he led the NFL. Did intercept 2 passes in his career, 1 for a touchdown, recovered 23 fumbles, 2 first scores. Was included on my Mount Rushmore of defensive tackles. I consider him one of the four best defensive tackles in NFL history, and there's been quite a few good ones. Page was named to the Hall of Fame All 1970s team. Made nine Pro Bowls, nine straight with the Vikings from 1968 to 1976. Had 5 seasons out of six, 1970 and 71, then 73 through 75, where he was named a first team All Pro. This was a challenging one, but in the end, I went defensive tackle Alan Page. Now, again, they had many great players, but for the GOAT, I really went back and forth between Alan Page and quarterback Fran Tarkington. Definitely would understand if you went Tarkington. Tarkington did have the middle of his career where he played with the New York Giants, but had two different tenures with the Vikings, and again, a former MVP. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Who do you consider the best Vikings player of all time? Now, with all of these, I take a look at the current roster and decide if I think any active player has a chance to overtake the GOAT or maybe make the Mount Rushmore in some way. Of course, the first guy that comes to mind is wide receiver Justin Jefferson. Now, he played just 10 games this season, but in his first 4 seasons has totaled 392 catches for 5,899 yards and 30 touchdowns, nearly averaging 100 yards receiving a game. Other than that, on the active roster, maybe, a Harrison Smith has made 6 Pro Bowls, so you could probably consider him an honorable mention now. But a guy like Kirk Cousins, maybe an honorable mention. Of course, he left the Vikings after 6 seasons with them, now joining the Atlanta Falcons. Someone like Daniil Hunter, he played, let's see, 9 seasons with the Vikings, totaling 87.5 sacks. Maybe those guys are honorable mentions, but on the active roster, really just Justin Jefferson, who maybe has a shot at the Mount Rushmore. Going to be really tough to overtake Alan Page, though. But stay tuned for tomorrow. Guys, I'm doing every team. I mean, some teams are more obvious than others. Tomorrow will be the New England Patriots. I mean, I don't think there's any suspense who I'm going to take, but still check it out. Find out who else I included on my Mount Rushmore and things like that. Anyhow, don't forget to subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. Like the video, share the video, hit the bell for notifications. I'm out.